Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the final StandICT.eu webinar for 2020. And we're delighted to have over 100 of you with us for today's webinar this afternoon. And the title is StandICT and the Rolling Plan, a common path to support ICT standards development. Now, as you may all be aware, the rolling plan goes through, I've understood now, a yearly iteration with many of you contributing from the ICT standards community stakeholder grouping. And we thought with the imminent delivery of the 2020 ICT rolling plan, wouldn't it be great to have some key authoritative individuals who work on this and put together a webinar to help preempt then the exposure that it is going to come out particularly soon in the coming months. So without further ado, I'm Silvana Muscella. I'm the CEO of StandICT, and we are the project coordinator of the project together with our partner Fraunhofer Focus that supports StandICT, which completes its 26-month journey this February 2020. So it was a good way to sign off, if you like, in style with the completion with this webinar. And we're delighted, if I can get my slide to work, to have the following speakers with us. So they've joined us from all over the globe. So I'll be moderating together also with my deputy Francesco Osimanti, who is going to do a dive in on the impact. Then we're pleased to have two commission officials with us. I have the project officer of StandICT, Thomas Reibe, and Emilio Davila-Gonzalez, who's the EC head of sector for ICT standardization. We also managed to bring on board Jochen Friedrich, the MSP, the multi-stakeholder platform chair and technical relations executive at IBM. Brian McAuliffe is the ISO IEC-JTC1 liaison officer, and Constant Kohler, the Sensenelec ICT Standardization Program Manager. So as you can see, we have a wonderful mix of key people who have helped take forward and deliver what we have today for the rolling plan. So what the actual rolling plan covers are the DSM topics in the 2020, which I won't go into the detail. I'll leave that to the esteemed experts. But there have been identified 165 actions. Now, the relationship between the rolling plan and StandICT is that we, as a project, if you recall, StandICT actually provides financial support to ICT standard experts on the various elements around the digital single market pillars that you see here written in the at the bottom of the slide. And what we've done is, in the 8 open calls that came out during the lifetime of the project of the 26 months, experts brought in their ideas to support the DSM topics. And what we then did was to map the calls to what was then indicated as part of the rolling plan for ICT. In parallel, StandICT put together a standards watch, which I'll show you in a short while. But I think it's nice at this stage of the project and for the future to consider what is actually indicated in the rolling plan as a discovery opportunity for the experts who work on projects like StandICT to dip into the rolling plan and say, hey, here's an idea that I want to take forward, and to consider it as an inclusive place for stakeholders to express what they can work on and help support the action points that have been indicated in the rolling plan. So the StandICT concludes. We wanted to provide a slide to say what we think our lasting legacy has been of the coordination and support action funded under Horizon 2020. So StandICT is sort of a recognised name, if you like, across the EU and the global ICT standards community. In terms of support, we actually funded 178 ICT experts. The actual contracts were more, but there were individuals who did apply more than once. So they were able to continue their standards efforts across the month. So it wasn't just one effort in some cases, across global SDOs and SSOs. We put together, we think, a comprehensive standards watch that covers the more important ICT standard domains, interfacing also with working group chairs or TC committee chairs to ensure that we have always the most updated version on the watch. In terms of the applications that came in, the level and quality was extremely high. We were also fortunate to have an active external advisory group that we would tap into also for input and insights. To actually contractualize these experts, we put together and personalized a grants platform that actually went through various iterations where we would obviously try and improve the user experience, which we did. And at the same time, we also introduced an element to try and analyze and put together the impact of these experts and what they actually brought into the actual SDO committee or group, because this is the information we wanted to then deliver to our stakeholders. And that has been then pulled together from the 178 ICT experts. There's one extract on each in the final impact report, which Francesco will give a quick overview on later on. And we believe we've created a solid network with excuse me, SDOs, standard bodies, PPPs, industry and research organizations, and there are over 2,500 in our profile database to date. Facts and figures. Some of you may have already seen these statistics, or I showed them at the final event, and you'll see here, sorry, just drinking, 8 open calls with huge input also and coverage from 26 European countries. The topics are also indicated here, and we have some stats on the high quality applications. You may have also seen this slide where we've ingrained and actually understood where did the money go. The money, if you recall, in the CSA was 1.4 million euro, and out of these successful applications, in the pie charts you can see where the distribution of funds were actually indicated. We've also expressed where the other category have gone into as well to demonstrate transparency. So there has been, and also what's been encouraging is feedback also from the SDOs on individuals who have been able to concretely benefit into these groups. The standards, what I referred to earlier, this is a snapshot of what you see when you go onto the website and the breakdowns in terms of numbers. We try to work hard to try and reach by this date, February 2020, of hitting the over 1,000 figure of uploading standards, and we're pleased that we've now achieved this figure. So when you go there, you can see precisely what is there. It's a work in progress, the standards watch, where what we've wanted to do in the second year of the project was to make it a more user experience part where the actual community could upload comments, and this is part of the wiki watch of the project. This tree map chart is a representation of the SDOs within the standards watch in terms of the number of standards that have been uploaded. So we consider this as an interactive observatory that aims at becoming this benchmark for the EU standardization community. When I talked about the user experience before, each applicant was obliged to complete the results of what they actually did with the money. And thanks to also the reviewers' recommendations at the interim review, we improved this part of the monitoring and introduced a series of drop-down menus and free text to actually drill down where the individual supported. How did it make an impact to that SDO in terms of either responding to the gaps they achieved, what EU priorities did they manage to respond to, and this monitoring system helped us then pull out the information that then we took and translated that into the impact report. Sorry, I'm going the wrong way. The Wiki Watch, the functionality of the Standards Watch where I can comment and write what I want, is something that everyone can do, and we invite you all to personally contribute to this landscape, because it helps then ensure whatever's written there is updated. It helps to then decide what we should be concentrating on more, and it's something where a user experience is noted and important. So our final event took place last December at the Commission premises, and it was a useful opportunity to have there the various stakeholders. Many of the grantees attended to give their opinion on how they saw and took advantage of the funding that they received. It was also a good exercise to see what worked and what didn't, and how things should perhaps go forward in the case of a future follow-up project. And indeed, whatever with this or something like StandICT will surely continue in the future, as there is funding available to continue to support ICT standard experts. So where we see and what the lessons learned for a strategy and road ahead for the next 3 years, we wanted to put together, also thanks to comments that came out of the final event. So the promotion of educational initiatives, and this is something we're going to listen to in today's webinar, is crucial to help train the future generation of ICT standards experts, and StandICT has already begun this aspect in the first 26 months, speaking to national associations on what they're doing to help pursue this. We know already that ETSI, ISO, StandICT have a series of educational activities ongoing now that need further promotion. Knowledge sharing is key to help pursue key domains of the DSM. Stronger connection, this came out of the final event in December, with both SMEs and the vertical industries to help fully exploit their capacity, listening to use cases or best practices to then help anticipate what technological trends need to be discussed in the future. And digital sovereignty came out and was regarded as one of the priority topics for the future, linked also around the efforts in networking, clouds and IoT, where Europe is in very much the driving force around these points. So with that, sorry, I have a mouse that doesn't work particularly well. If you haven't seen our video of the final event, then please do take a look. It's very interesting with some good interviews from our project officers and main stakeholders. And do follow us on our social media channels. And if you have information you want to share with us that you haven't seen already in our Wiki Watch or as part of our ICT insights that you can find online, then please do take a look and have a look at that. So thank you very much. This was my introduction, and without further ado, I'm going to pass this on to our first speaker, who is Thomas Reibe. Thomas is an EC senior expert at DG Connect at the European Commission, and he's the StandICT.eu project officer, who I'd like to thank you and Emilio personally for all your support that you've given us, your insights and your thought leadership, which we have very appreciated over these months. Thomas is going to be dipping into the ICT Rolling Plan and going through the overall structure and the main purpose. So I can't see your slides at the moment. I think they're still coming up. Thomas, and there we are. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Okay, then I start. The rolling plan actually is in the framework, is done in the framework of an expert group, which is called the Multi-Stakeholder Platform for ICT Standardization. And we have actually two main planning tools. One of the planning tool is the rolling plan for ICT standardization. And the second one is the Annual Union Work Program of the European Union. Suddenly this disappears. The standards actually here, what we see is on the standardization side, we have quite a lot of standards for market integrations, which are done in support mainly for EU regulations, which are in the most cases safety and security standards, which are done by StandICT and ETSI, and they supporting the market access. The other part which we're having is standards is part of the innovation cycle, where we are expecting that standardizations can help in parallel with patents and IPR issues to support new products and put them into the market. For ICT, the main activities on standardization is outside the European standardization systems. So you have a lot of standards going on, for example, the internet standards in IETF. Then you have the ISO IEC GTC1 standardization activities, and ITU for the International Telecommunication Union. So we thought from the Commission it would be interesting to put all that together and to see how all the standards organizations, together with our member states, can actually support our European policies and our European regulations. Out of that, we have created what is called the Multi-Stakeholder Platform for ICT Standardizations, which promotes all by bringing global standards bodies together with foreign consortia, while addressing public and consumer needs via the presence of the member states and societal stakeholder associations. Next slide, please. And then, so the multi-stakeholder platform is already now it had been created in 2011 and is active since 2012. It had been renewed twice. The last renewal was last year, 2019. And we have here in this expert group the major global standards organizations, but also the European ones like StandICT and ETSI. And we have all industry, SMEs, societal representatives to discuss basically here standards. On the other side, we have all the European member states. So the slide is not updated now. England is actually gone, so it should be also a little bit gray, but we will update it later. Next slide, please. So one of the deliverables of the expert group MSP is the rolling plan for ICT standardization. This comes together, which is done from the annual unit work program. The annual unit work program is also a planning tool which is published on a yearly basis, and it's in relation to Article 8 of Regulation 1025/2012, which outlines basically the standardization needs in support of EU regulations. So it only covers actually future EU regulations or existing EU regulations where some modifications needs to be done to certain standards. And together with this annual unit work programs coming an annual communication which identifies also strategic priorities and to our European standardization systems. Inside this annual work program is a list of standards requests which are given to or expected to be given to the European Standards Organization, so StandICT and ETSI, and only these can do actually this standards work. There, for ICT standardization, we had the feeling that there needs to be something more to be done. We had a lot of policies which are not too much formal in laid down in regulation. So at the beginning, so more than 10 years ago, the predecessor of the rolling plan was just a planning tool where we ask actually our colleagues what kind of standards you would like to do in support of your policies. And then DG Grow had this Excel sheet, and with that they could plan of funding request from the ESUS in support of these kind of policies. From that, we thought it might be better, since we don't want ICT standardization, as I said before, is quite wide, and it's not limited to the ESUS. So it was thought to have a bigger view of that, and include all what we have as a need for EU policies, but also for EU regulations. So this is giving a wider view, and it's not now any more limited to the European standardization system or the ESUS, but also we are encouraging basically all global standards organizations who have some standardization activities in support of this EU policies. So the rolling plan for ICT standardization is drafted together with the multi-stakeholder platform. So it's not only the EC view of what needs to be done, but every section is actually introduced by the European Commission, outlining what are the EU policies in that sense. The standards scope is mainly to short to medium term, so from 1 year to 3 years, sometimes 5 years, for what needs to be done in that sense. So as Silvana said, there's a couple of several hundred actions which had been identified, and which gives them the implementation of this the needs in that sense. And so from the funding side, only the ESUS getting some funding in the rolling plan, but like Silvana said just before, the CSA StandICT was also giving, as there was a strategic decision that all topics which were laid down in the rolling plan actually could be funded so experts could get some funds to attend some standards meetings. Next slide, please. So the rolling plan is giving a nice overview of the EU policies where ICT standardization is considered relevant for support. This is quite unique in the world. So nobody has that, giving a nice overview of that. And it's quite a lot of work here, even inside the Commission, and also for the MSP, and also thanks to Jochen and Emilio to work on these things quite heavily. And it defines the most important standardization initiatives and action to support EU policies for the next years. As I said, it's complementary to the annual work program, which only outlines the standardization requests in support of EU regulation. And the rolling plan is a living document which we update every year. So it's normally published in February every year. So, and it's addressed to all ICT stakeholders, so not just the ESOs, as I mentioned. And the document, as I said, it's drafted by the Commission and with the support of this expert group, MSP. Next slide, please. So the rolling plan has a big impact. So the impact is on one side, the policy priorities and strategy we had for ICT in 2016, priorities communication, where we outline what is our priorities. It supports our legislation in place, but it's also ongoing work for the policies, and the document is giving quite some concrete actions which needs to be implemented. So all these actions are connected to kind of the strategy, and collaboration is done with market lead and global standardization. So as I mentioned, it's quite unique in the world, outlining our policies and the regulatory framework here from the European Commission. And every year there are some new topics coming into the frame which can be extended. Next slide, please. I think that was the last one. Yes, and here is basically our websites. If you would like to look now the 2020 rolling plan, which should have been published now this week probably, and we will let you know about the things. So you can see all the activities there. Thank you.
Super, Thomas. Thank you very much. Now, whilst we get the next slides up for Emilio, why don't we, I was going to not do the question, but I think we might have a time for the quick question for you, Thomas. How do you see the ICT standardization rolling plan supporting new EU policy, especially in the fields of what I mentioned also in my slide that came out of the final event last December, education and training? Quick reply. Thank you very much.
Yes, every year we are actually looking for new topics since the rolling plan is based on the goodwill of all our colleagues who are thinking that some actions needs to be done in the ICT standardization world. So one of the 2021 versions, so which we're starting just now, to reflect what needs to be done, is, for example, about education and training, where the best activities can be shared together. There is already some work going on in GTC1 about education and training and how to improve that. And I think this would be quite interesting for the community to use the best practice in new training materials, not just for standardization, but in general, that our youngest public, for example, getting attracted, and even the more senior people, that they're getting trained, because all our work lives is changing dramatically in the next couple of years.
Thank you very much, Thomas. Okay, and with that, if you have any questions for Thomas, please don't hesitate to put them up on the chat that comes up as part of the system we have. Over to you now, Emilio Davila-Gonzalez. As I mentioned earlier, he's the EC Head of Sector ICT Standardization, the Unit Digital Innovation and Blockchain at the European Commission and DG Connect. And he's going to dive in and tell us what's new in the rolling plan. Over to you, Emilio.
Okay, thank you, Silvana, and good afternoon, everybody. I hope you can see my slides.
We can see and hear you very well.
Thank you very much. So I will try to explain you a little bit what is new in the rolling plan that my colleague Thomas has explained with so much detail. So this year, and possibly Jochen later will explain more about that, about the process, but this year we have seen really to make the new version of the rolling plan. As you know, every year we try to update the rolling plan. So removing the actions that are already old because they have been completed or they are not most necessary, and including new actions because, of course, both the policy context, the technology environment is changing a lot. So this year I think we have scored a record with more than 250 comments input submitted from the members of the multi-stakeholder platform that Thomas has explained, including United Kingdom that at that time was still full member. And also with a lot of interactions from the Commission services, from the colleagues that are in charge or dealing with topics that are included in the rolling plan. So you have here the figures, so more than 250 comments from the different members of the multi-stakeholder platform, and we are very glad about that. We have also realized that the rolling plan has now public attention at a high level. So when you go and discuss with people from the standardization community around the world, they are aware of the rolling plan. Again, as Thomas says, it's a unique instrument, and we are very satisfied that now it has a visibility. And regarding this year, we don't have new chapters like last year, for instance, when we had new for context environment or for blockchain 2 years ago. But many policy chapters has been updated, in particular with reference to policy documents, for instance, those that were adopted last week by the Commission on the digital strategy, the white paper on artificial intelligence, the communication on big data, public data, which of course will need some standardization activities, then are already included in the rolling plan, as such many others. There are no new chapters, but I will come back to that later, but there are many updated actions in the different chapters, and there are also new actions that have been included. So far, we have kept the same structure as for the rolling plan 2019, which in one sense is good because now people are getting used to this structure and they know where to find either the policy instruments, either the actions that the Commission and the stakeholders believe that are important to support EU public policies or regulations, and also important thing, what's going on, what it has been performing the different by the different standards development organization and communities. But then we have kept the same substructure. And something from these more than 250 comments submitted, we have seen a lot of interactions, a lot of feedback from the different standards development organizations on what they are currently doing. So this is a good way when you try to find out what's going on in standardization. When you try to map standardization activities, you can find a lot of information on which standard development organization, which technical committees are doing what in which particular topic. This also helps, and this is also something we believe is useful from the rolling plan to try to better coordinate and avoid overlappings, but rather cooperation, promote cooperation between the different stakeholder organizations. So something also that we have tried to highlight more in the version of the rolling plan of this year is to make a stronger focus on the actions, on the political actions that are included in the section B of the rolling plan, which again, let me remind, these are proposals to the global standardization community, so not only to the European Standardization Organization, but to the standards development organizations, formal or consortia or fora that are developing ICT standards internationally, for possible standardization activities in support of EU policy objectives of EU regulations. And but not only to them, also to stakeholders. Some standardization communities are address some actions in order, for instance, to reflect what would be the next steps, I don't know, in artificial intelligence, let's say, what needs to be done. And we have also tried to make this curve set of criteria, so trying to define actions that are concrete, achievable, relevant, and voluntary. And this is important because on one side, we try to ensure that what we put into the rolling plan is not wishful thinking that then later is too much over optimistic, but not that it could be feasible to be realized. And this is the most important thing, what we try to achieve, that different standardization organizations, different standardization communities could propose, could take ownership of the different actions and deliver the contents. This is the structure of the rolling plan for 2020, which is basically the same that the previous year. And so it's a structure in the 4 policy areas: key enablers and security, innovations for the digital single market, societal challenges, and sustainable growth. And again, in all the 4 big chapters, there have been updates being done. Then there is also another chapter of horizontal building blocks, where I explain the different building blocks transversal to the different sets of topics, and then define not in terms of actions, but in terms of what can be done to support the different actions. So if we enter into the different policy areas of the rolling plan, for the first one, key enablers and security, here you have the list of chapters. These, of course, are important to support the different ICT applications and the digital policies and strategies in Europe, but I think not only in Europe, but also worldwide. You have here the list from 5G, that soon will possibly be 6G, cloud computing, public sector information and big data, Internet of Things, cybersecurity, network information security. Here, for instance, there has been an important update, including all the different actions that are needed to support the Cybersecurity Act and these certification frameworks, electronic identifications and trust services, including e-signatures. And here as well, there has been update of the different actions following the results of the action included in the previous version of the rolling plan. Then in privacy, well, for instance, there is also an update about how to look into the DOH and not only for the chapter of e-privacy, but also what could be the relations with the other topics, infrastructure, broadband infrastructure mapping, accessibility. There we have also a new actions, which is an update taking into account that we already had the new harmonized standard for web accessibility, and now is working on the new mandate to update for accessibility in general. Artificial intelligence, and there is also update of the actions to include what is requested as consequences of the high-level report of the high-level expert groups from the Commission, and also initiatives like artificial intelligence for EU, what would be the requirements to be fulfilled, not only in terms of standardization, but also on open source implementations. Or in Internet of Things, there are more actions to coordinate between the different standardization organizations, and in particular for wireless communication IoT, taking into account the requirements made by the verticals. So this is for the first bulk of actions. Then for the second big one, societal challenges. This is important because we believe that standardization is not only to produce technical specifications to promote innovation and technical, but also for the benefit of the public and the citizen in general. And here you have e-health, where there is also has been updates due to the ongoing standardization work, healthy living and aging. Then digital skills and e-learning, this is important. And Thomas already mentioned the importance of having a skilled standardization expert, but in general, we need to have more digital skills and e-learning. So which standards could be provided for that? Emergency communications, here there have been updates of the actions after the adoption of the electronic communication code that have more emphasis on the caller locations for mobile calls, for instance, the next generation 112, the updates of the standards that have been achieved already, and also the overall awareness of emergencies for focus groups. E-government and e-call, where also there have been new updates with actions that have been removed because the standards are already available, and with new actions as a consequences of the previous standard, for instance, on how to interact with connected vehicles standards and emergency call. Innovation for the digital single market. This is very important for Europe. Europe, you know, we need the standards in order to ensure cross-border interoperability within the Union, but also it would be useful beyond Europe. And there we have these chapters: e-procurement, e-invoicing, car internet and mobile payments, preservation of digital cinema. This is really for the Europe, fintech and standardization, and then blockchain and distributed digital ledger technologies. And in blockchains, for instance, there is a new action on smart contracts, and also to ensure that there is cooperation between the different standard development organizations and the communities that are active, like the new public and private partnerships internationally, like INATBA, the International Association of Trusted Blockchain Association, but also the European blockchain partnerships that are proposing requirements and technical specifications that would be convenient to be standardized. This has been gathered and reflected in the chapter of the Rolling Plan. And finally, the chapter on sustainable growth, where we have all these 11 topics, and there have been also some updates of the actions in different ones, like in smart cities and communities, ICT for environmental impact. And here, in particular, we will believe that that will be have an even more importance taking into account the Green Deal that the new Commission is so care of. The European Electronic Toll Service, update of the actions due to the new Implementation Act that has entered into force. For intelligent transport system and cooperative and automotive mobility, here there has been a reshape of the chapter. This is one of the longest chapters in the Rolling Plan, looking at things like connected vehicles, automated vehicles now, electromobility, and we have streamlined the different actions, taking into account those that were already completed, new mandates like for urban mobility, and then the new situation with the implementing act that were not accepted by the council, but how then to make the different possible technologies for connected vehicles interoperable and compatible. Advanced manufacturing, robotics and autonomous system, and the link with artificial intelligence. And then the common information sharing environment. For instance, here there has been an update of the actions to take into account what the different pilots have already achieved for, in particular, the maritime domain. So basically, we don't have this year new chapters, but we have a lot of streamline, more concrete actions and a lot of updates in the different chapters. As Thomas has explained, now the rolling plan is in the primary way, so we hope the first we will have a digital version very soon. I don't know whether we will manage to have it already before the end of February. We are expecting that this would be the case, and then the hard copy being published by the Office of Publication of the European Commission soon.
Thank you,
Thank you
Emilio.
very much.
Thank you very much for that very important insights together with Thomas. It's very important that our stakeholders understand exactly what's new and what's coming out in 2020. I'm going to move this quickly along, and I'm going to pass the floor directly to Jochen Friedrich. Hello, Jochen. Jochen is our MSP chair and is the Technical Relations Executive at IBM. He's a member of the Regional Board of the German Association of Electrical Engineering and Foundation Board member of the EIC. His title is Keeping the Plan Rolling, the Making and Implementation of the EU Rolling Plan on ICT Standardization. Jochen, over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, and I'm not the chair of the MSP. I'm only the chair of the task force from the MSP on the rolling plan. But
I apologize. That's our oversight.
No problem. Okay, can you see the slides well? Everything fine?
We can hear and see you. We can hear you well. See the slides are fine.
Perfect. So I can go pretty quickly over the first slides because Emilio already mentioned this, the rolling plan. What it is, how it works, how it is outlined. It is about ICT standardization support for the EU policy priorities. It has a couple of chapters, and the main part is in chapter 3. It's these 4 clusters that Emilio outlined, and in total more than 30 sub-chapters, one for each sector, translating policy into proposals for actions, how standardization can support the policy objectives. As such, it is perfect. It's a perfect collaboration work with the Commission and inside of the Commission, bringing all the different policy areas also together into one document and one perspective where ICT standards can help. You already saw this, the substructure. Each chapter, sub-chapters of chapter 3 has the same substructure, which means it gives an overview on policy and legislation, the policy objectives, the e-perspective, the progress report, also the respective legislative documents, communications, white papers, regulations, directives, whatever is available are listed in this part A. And then you have part B, which is the core, the requested actions. And then you have part C, ongoing and available activities, also extremely valuable, where you get an overview of what is already going on globally in standardization. The rolling plan has also the objective to avoid unnecessarily duplicating efforts. So it's extremely important to have this section as well, C1, related standardization activities, or C2, additional information, like also research projects, Horizon Europe projects that are going on that may be of relevance for standardization at some point in time or contribute to it. And also Emilio mentioned this, the CARF, we want to be concrete, achievable, relevant, and voluntary in the actions. It's not where the Commission says you must do this. If the Commission really want to initiate a standard, where they say we want this, we need it in support of regulation or legislation or policy, then this goes into the annual Union Work Program, is addressed to the 3 European standardization organizations. But where it is to kick off work voluntarily by reaching out to the global standards community, then the rolling plan for ICT is the tool that is being used. Now, to achieve all of this, we want to be up to date. And that's important, utterly important. The rolling plan needs to reflect the state of the art. It needs to be current, it needs to be up to date. And to achieve this, it is updated on an annual basis. This is why we really keep it rolling. The cycle always starts in spring, and it's fully collaborative within the EU multi-stakeholder platform and together with the Commission services. So it's really based on crowd wisdom, if you like, when we collect input from all members. I will go into these details soon. And this updating every year works according to a very well defined and implemented 5-step process, which we have developed over the years. When we started, it was not maybe 5 steps, maybe it was only 3 steps. But very soon we came to these 5 steps, and we have refined them, but essentially kept to these 5 steps over the years. Now, what are these 5 steps? How does this review cycle look? How do we ensure that it's all transparent, it's open, we have broad input? On the right-hand side here, you see the 5 steps. It starts always with input from the European Commission. So every spring, the colleagues, Emilio, Thomas, and other colleagues from the Commission reach out to the Commission services and check with them on what would be their updates against the rolling plan. Now, this is not always quite easy because the current rolling plan for the running year has then just been published, maybe for 6-8 weeks. And then the services are already asked to think about the next steps. So, but it needs to be early in the year, and usually, very often, they already have something. If not, we manage this. Okay, but first input always from the Commission. We collect this input, we put it together when we have a first collection of all inputs from the Commission, and then over summer, let's say in July, August, September until early autumn, we run a very broad consultation, step 2 here, with all multi-stakeholder platform members. Everybody, and remember, multi-stakeholder platform members are organizations, member states, Annex 3 organizations. So again, groups that represent a very, very broad constituency. So this is why we give it also 2.5 to 3 months for this consultation. They all reach out to their constituency, collect input to the rolling plan, then submit it into the process. This is happening over summer, really a very, very broad activity. That's the crowd wisdom I was referring to. Then step 3, all of these inputs get task force working on this. And we put together a first pre-final draft with all inputs. This pre-final draft is then shared with the MSP. The MSP, that's step 4, can do a final check, can ask questions for clarifications. There may be stuff in there that comes as a surprise for some because it has been suggested by one group. This requires the step 4 to clarify, to rediscuss. And after this is being completed, we move to step 5, which is then towards end of the year, usually into early January, the endorsement by the MSP, and then the handover to the European Commission for publication. The European Commission always has the last word. They can add, they can change things, but we make sure that we have a close interlock with the Commission services so that there are nobody is surprised at any point in time, but we make sure that there's always transparency and discussion and a close dialogue with all parties providing input as well. Whoops, now I lost focus, sorry. Okay, teamwork and crowd wisdom, as I said, are at the core of the process here. And this is also what makes it so unique and also valuable at the same time. There is a very, very high commitment by a very dedicated team to work together on this. The task force working on the rolling plan is a subgroup of the multi-stakeholder platform. It's of course open to all MSP members. Anybody can join anytime, and it coordinates the annual review process. So this is a group of 15, maybe more people who get together to help, together with a lot of help from the Commission, Emilio and Thomas and others, to collect input, to put it together, to prepare the final draft, to collect all the inputs coming from the MSP members, consolidate that, have the discussion with the services. This is what the task force does. And it usually meets once a month, but there are some peak times when the collection of input has been completed. October is always very, very busy, and early November as well. Okay, and there is also the broad basis of expertise, which contributes here to the crowd wisdom. As I said, there are 2 periods for all multi-stakeholder platform members to provide inputs, raise comments, seek clarifications. And this means, as I said earlier, an outreach to constituencies of more than 70 MSP members. We have also, over the years, moved to a very advanced digital collaboration, I would say. All our meetings of the task force on the rolling plan are done electronically, except for 2. We usually have 2 physical meetings per year where we leverage the meetings of the multi-stakeholder platform, and most of the people who are active in the task force are traveling to Brussels anyway, stay another day, and we have a half day or 3/4 of a day meeting of the task force. But anything else is done electronically via web conference tools. And also for the documents, we of course started with sending around annotated files, and over the years we have moved everything onto a wiki. The benefit here is, first of all, it's not depending on one editor to put everything together. You can really have real collaboration, real time on stuff. And there is a high transparency at any time for all multi-stakeholder platform members. What is being discussed, what is being decided, what is being done. Also extremely well managed by the Commission and highly accepted by everybody working on this, and a role model, I would say, of public-private collaboration. Now, implementation and progress recording, the who, how, what, why, where, when. You don't want to have just a plan for the sake of having a plan. You want it to be implemented. You want things to happen. So, as I said earlier, and Emilio said it as well, and Thomas said it as well, the rolling plan is a proposal to the standardization community. Its intention is to trigger standardization work being started as a contribution to EU policy objectives via ICT standardization. So the standardization community gets active based on the rolling plan actions, on the concrete concrete, achievable, etc. actions. And then new work items, new technical committees, other activities in standardization get started. And from the MSP, from the multi-stakeholder platform, we collect information back about new activities, about activities responding to the actions in the rolling plan, and about their status. Now, we keep this internal to the multi-stakeholder platform. This is not being published widely, but there is some progress recording, and a bit of progress status sometimes gets also into the rolling plan in the text to say, okay, progress has been made on this and that, and the next step comes here. There's also a regular exchange with the services of the European Commission, because they should know, they bring in the requests, the actions, they should know what's going on. And with this progress recording, we ensure that the rolling plan also has an effect and that the effect is visible to everyone. Now, coming to the end, all of this is widely appreciated and has global attention. It really helps to get best of class standards supporting EU policy objectives. Policymakers value the rolling plan and the results it brings. And the standardization community responds to actions in the rolling plan in dynamic ways. And oops, here we go. And it's unique in the world. It's worth repeating any time. The rolling plan has set, I would say, a global standard, if you allow me the phrase here, with how to work. And it's a source of inspiration and innovation worldwide. And with this, many thanks. Thank you very much.
Wonderful, Jochen. Thank you very much. I think that's an important takeaway, the unique in a world. You're absolutely right. And I don't think we probably make enough of a fuss about that. I do like the references on CARV that both you and Emilio have also made. We have questions, but I'm not going to take them because I want us to run through and give the desired time to our speakers because they deserve it, and we'll do any questions at the end. So our next speaker, thank you once again, Jochen, is Brian McAuliffe. We have Brian on as the ISO IEC JTC1 Liaison Officer, so to the EC, and he's an active member there on the technical committee and is responsible for international standardization in information technology and covers various topics such as IoT, AI, cybersecurity and 3D printing. Brian, you're going to say your title is the ICT Rolling Plan, keeping European and international ICT standards in sync. Extremely important. I know there was a reference that you made, Jochen, just earlier about also the European projects. You know, what's happening in these EU projects that we can ensure that whatever comes out of there on dedicated tasks in the work packages that they have there are also taken into consideration. So that's something that we should always ensure. So, Brian, the floor to you, please.
Thank you, Silvana, and good afternoon, everybody. So the purpose of my presentation really, yes, is to show how the rolling plan is a good mechanism for at least attempting to keep European and international standards together or in sync. So when we talk about international standards in the realm of ICT, the primary source of such standards is ISO IEC JTC1, that's Joint Technical Committee 1. You can see the structure of JTC1 on the screen. It's been in operation for more than 30 years now, and it's a fairly prolific source of standards with over 3,000 published and currently more than 500 under development. The participation rate is pretty high with over 100 countries, slightly less than half of them being very active or participating members. But one of the key messages here is that of those participating members, we have a very good representation from the European member states. So that is important to ensure the European voice is heard while those international standards are being developed. And on the left-hand side here, I've just highlighted in using the color coding from the StandICT report, the various topics that are worked on in JTC1 and that are very relevant to the rolling plan. So when we talk about aligning EU and international standards, there's some very good mechanisms in place already. The Frankfurt Agreement between IEC and StandICT, the Vienna Agreement between ISO and SEN, and those agreements allow parallel work to take place so that each of the international and European organizations are not working separately on the same topic. Sometimes, of course, there is particular needs in Europe for a European-only standard, and that's fine. But the general aim is to have one common standard. When you come to JTC1, however, it's slightly more complicated because neither the Frankfurt or the Vienna agreements apply. But there are mechanisms, and the example I give at the bottom there shows how the JTC1 standard 27000, which is to do with information security management systems, has been Europeanized or transposed via StandICT JTC 13 to become a European version of that standard. And in this case, which is always the aim, it's an identical content in the European and the international standard. So this stat here shows that there are, if you compare the StandICT and IEC standards, you have over 70% of the StandICT standards are identical to the IEC standards. The percentage on the SEN side isn't as high, but some of that is because SEN has ISO has such a wide range of technical committees. You know, everything from screw threads to photography. You know, almost every topic is covered, and SEN would not have the same European standards efforts on some of those topics. Also, in the ICT domain, SEN, up to relatively recently, didn't have very many technical committees active in the ICT domain, and they're now starting, for example, with the cybersecurity I mentioned there, JTC 13, and also just recently they've launched a blockchain technical committee. So moving on, so how is the rolling plan important in trying to ensure this synchronization between international and European standards? And that's, I guess, the main point here. And in JTC1, for example, they have this body, or an advisory group, as they call it, which is always looking forward at new emerging trends, trying to identify where there may be standards needs. And then from that work, JTC1 will initiate some standards projects. So because the rolling plan highlights the European policy objectives in various topics, JTC1 is able to keep itself aware of those of that content in the rolling plan, and it can inform the work that JTC1 does in identifying new topics. And then conversely, once the JTC1 current work programs are made aware to European Commission policy teams, etc., then the actions that they request and that are put into the rolling plan can be informed somewhat by the work that's also going on internationally. So it's kind of like a symbiotic relationship there. Some of the on the bottom right hand side there, you can see some of the kind of future topics that JTC1 is looking at, and these are also becoming relevant for European policy. So how that works in practice? Well, the European Commission has established what they call a liaison, or a category A liaison in this case, with JTC1, and that's in DG GROW, which is kind of the standardization unit. But in fact, it's managed by Thomas, who was speaking earlier from DG Connect. And then on the JTC1 side, it appoints a liaison officer to work with the Commission to ensure that that synchronization and awareness raising is always kept current. Currently, I'm fulfilling that role on behalf of JTC1. So we would both report into the JTC1 plenary meetings, which happen twice per year. The next one being in Ireland, actually in May. And but when you get down to the nitty-gritty of it, so in practice, what we do is we make sure that the relevant JTC1 committees, for example, cloud, cyber, etc., are connected with the policy officers in the various DGs in the Commission, and they share information, share draft documents. When there are committee meetings in Europe, the EC policy officers can attend and contribute contribute to the work. There's no restriction. Interestingly, the two topics in red there are ones that are not covered in any great detail at all in the rolling plan yet, and they're topics that JTC1 is looking at. And I guess with the announcements this week on the Commission policy for the next 5 years and the whole digital AI strategy, data governance was something that was mentioned a lot in there, and there is a standards element to that again, hopefully the work that's going on in JTC1 can help to inform what Europe does. So JTC1 then via me is also represented on the task force that Jochen just talked about. So we try to ensure that each year during that 5-step process, the most up-to-date input is gathered from the JTC1 community and fed into the rolling plan so that it's reflective of current practice. And this is getting towards the end here now. This slide, this graphic here is taken from the StandICT report that Silvana and her team put together. And just to show I guess the relevance of JTC1 work to the European effort and the StandICT program, 35% of all the funded applicants were for experts to take part in JTC1 projects. And if you break that down further, when you look through, you can see that about a third of those were cyber, followed by AI. Again, all the topics that we've been talking about today are the ones with JTC1 are active, and obviously there is interest amongst European experts, and via StandICT, they can be funded to take part. So the European voice has a channel to ensure it is heard in the international standards arena. So hopefully that's given you an overview of how we at least are continually trying to keep the two worlds, in international and European standards in ICT in sync. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them later.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Brian. I do have some questions. I think whilst we move over to the slide deck, let's answer a couple of these, get some of these answered already from our very active community who's online. So is the MSP an open platform for any interested party to join and make contributions to?
Well, no, so you either have to represent a member state or one of the European standards organizations, one of the following consortia. So you can't just apply to join as an individual. You either have to be nominated for your member state or a standards body or a consortium.
Okay, thank you very much, Brian. Thomas, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, actually, the MSP is in European Commission expert groups, so it has to comply with the rules of the Commission expert groups. We have a communication out in 2011 setting out the rules of the MSP. So there, as Brian said, there's a certain place for member states, but there's also some places for standards organizations and societal stakeholders. And every 3 years, we're putting up an open call to ask interested parties to join the MSP. So in between, there can be no new entity can join the MSP because we have limited sets of places actually in the MSP. And but every 3 years we have an open call, and then all the different entities and social stakeholders and standards organization can apply to join the MSP.
Very good. Thank you very much, Thomas. I'm going to as we have the luxury of having an SDO representative here as well, Constant, one of our questions is there any platform or collaborative work for European experts, creating connections and a network for standardization experts to be used for collaboration on projects launched by the EC initiatives might be beneficial for all stakeholders? Constant, do you want to comment on that?
Good afternoon. Yeah, thank you for the question. So this is Constant from SEN and StandICT. So yeah, actually, so you may know that the European Commission is a very important actor in European standardization, and which can be the trigger to launch some specific European action. And this is why, at least from a StandICT perspective, we often create what we call some focus group or sector forum in order to gather the whole spectrum of the different stakeholders on a given topic, so that all those experts can come together in a very open way to address those different issues that are put forward by the European Commission.
Okay, that's very good. I'm going to leave another question till the end because we're going to pass the floor to Constant in a couple of moments. But let's have just a couple of minutes for Francesco to say something on the final impact report. Over to you, Francesco. Thank you.
Yeah, good afternoon to all of you. And Vice Coordinator of StandICT. I'm very pleased to be in here today. I got in touch with most of you across these 2 years, and I saw this community really grew up solidly. So now that we are approaching the very end of the project, what we decided to do is to gather together the main result, the main outcomes of each of our applicants, because we wanted to leave a tangible and very concrete lasting legacy of StandICT. This is basically the original idea that lies behind this final impact report. The impact report is both a digital and a paper document that we, by the way, we distributed during our last final event in Brussels that past December, where you can find all the outcomes, all the experiences of the grantees of StandICT that brought their European know-how and excellence across the world, joining multiple working groups and technical committees in several standard developing organizations, for a consortium or research institution as well. Well, the report highlights also the great investment of 1.4 million euros that has been made by the Commission, and how the different entities have been able sort of benefit of this free know-how. And when we ask what we ask to our specialists, it was a very careful and thorough analysis of what they did that enable us to pull out the most relevant aspect. So which kind of ICT challenge they had with their activities, which European priorities and gaps have been tackled, and what kind of contribution they tangibly made, both public and private. We have been able to expose and showcase this in an impact report. You have in front of you right now an example of what we did with our report. Well, I haven't much to say, just that you can have a first-hand view just going to the StandICT website. It's very easy to find in the homepage. You're going to be finding a banner. You can download it your own copy, and you can have also a clue of all the different a rolling plan domain and areas that have been covered by each of the applicants. And this is all. You can follow this link, but you can really easily find the report online. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Francesco. And our final speaker is Constant Koller. You've just heard from him just now. He's a StandICT ICT Standardization Program Manager, and he's going to tell us about linking ICT standards and EU policies, extremely important, and the role of European standardization. Thank you very much, and the floor is yours, Constant.
Thank you, Silvana, and good afternoon to everyone. So yeah, indeed, my name is Constant from StandICT, which are two of the three European standardization organizations together with ETSI. So the objective of my presentation is to give the StandICT perspective on the rolling plan, because STAN and StandICT are contributors, but also, let's say, customers of the rolling plan, actually. So the title is Linking ICT Standards and European Policies. That's the role of the rolling plan, but this is also the role of European standardization. So we can wonder, what is the added value of the rolling plan to bridge those two aspects, ICT standards and European policies? So in order to further understand this issue, I would like to just to divide my presentation in three parts. The first one quickly would be about the European standardization system and the link to European policies. The second part would be about international cooperation. And the third part will be about the role of the rolling plan to contribute to bridge ICT standard and European policies. So quickly, on the first aspect, which is about the European standardization system. So this is something I would like to provide from a StandICT perspective, but I believe many of the aspects that I will present can be shared with ETSI as well. So in Europe, what is harmonization? It means one standard solution that can be applied across all member states, replacing potentially 34 national standards. So this is a key component for the consolidation of the single market. Whenever possible, of course, the preference goes for international standardization in order to have one standard that can be applied worldwide in order to serve the multi-sectoral needs of the European industry. And when we talk about the European standardization system, the cooperation with the European Commission is essential in order to make sure that European standards can fit the regulatory and policy objective. And that's why the European Commission and all those different policy makers are key actors in the European standardization system. With the annual Union work program, with the harmonized standard, but also when it comes to the rolling plan. And as I mentioned, cooperation is key with policymakers, but also with international standardization, as we prefer to have, as I mentioned, one standard that can be applied worldwide in order to facilitate international trade, which can give European companies the tools to compete on the international scene. Further to that, and as a complement to what has been said by Brian, I just want to mention the cooperation agreement between StandICT and ISO and IC, because most of the European ICT standards are actually coming from ISO or IEC via the specific agreement between those four organizations. And those agreements also give the opportunity for StandICT when developing what we call homegrown standard to offer this project at international level. So those are very important tools for Europe to compete at the international level. And here we can notably pay tribute to StandICT on its role to provide some funding to European experts to work at international level. So in a nutshell, in this context, the role of StandICT is really to act as the interface between international standardization and the European business or policy needs in that respect. Which leads to my last slide, which is on the rolling plan as such, on the impact of the rolling plan. And as it was said by Thomas, the rolling plan is really about connecting strategy to action, which at StandICT we very much welcome. So for this part, I really would like to emphasize the role of the ICT rolling plan that the rolling plan plays in that respect. And we can divide the impact from a StandICT perspective into three different categories, which are about information, action, and also cooperation. First of all, I would like to mention that the rolling plan is a very important and great tool for business, for stakeholders, for different kinds of societal stakeholders to understand the policy objective in giving areas and the role that standards can play in that respect. It gives, I believe, a very important and useful overview of those published standards or under development, who is doing what. I believe this is something very important for the European market to know. And in this context, it gives also clear incentives to contribute in a relevant technical committee by providing this kind of different overview. Then I just would like to mention the actions, basically, because as it was said previously, within the rolling plan, you can find different actions for different topics. And those are clear action to different relevant technical committees in specific areas. So as I work within European standardization, within STAN and StandICT, my role indeed is to make my technical committees aware of those actions, so that my technical committee and the StandICT technical committee can have a clear frame about what is going on in Europe in terms of policy objectives, so that they can adjust their technical solution in that respect. It can be concerning the adoption of, for instance, of international standards. It can be for the completion of international standards with specific European requirements. It can also be incentives to fill different gaps in Europe potentially. And also it can be to trigger some funding which is something important for the standardization system because most of the time the experts are working on a voluntary basis. And then I also would like to mention the cooperation aspects because within the rolling plan, within the MSP, it's not only the European Commission and European Standardization Organization, but it's about all those organizations developing standards at international or European level. And each of these organizations have specific added value, specific benefits for which it's important to collaborate. And that's why this collaboration, which is triggered by the rolling plan and by the MSP, is something very important also from a StandICT perspective in order to build in Europe a coherent portfolio and a coherent and strategic portfolio of standards in order to meet the need of the European businesses and European stakeholders. So this cooperation is triggered by the rolling plan, by the drafting of the rolling plan as we all sit together, and it's the opportunity to see who is doing what are the short-term, mid-term goals of each organization so we can complement each other. For instance, when it comes to StandICT, the cooperation with IEEE on artificial intelligence, with OASIS on e-business topics, with W3C on e-accessibility, or with the other foreign consortia on cybersecurity. So I'd like to emphasize the great role of the rolling plan in that respect. And further to that, it's also the rolling plan, its elaboration, it's also the opportunity to foster the cooperation with the EU policymakers and also with between the European Standardization Organization, StandICT and ETSI. And in that respect, the rolling plan is a key facilitator of those different organizations in order to foster interaction, cooperation, and collaboration. So thank you very much for this opportunity to quickly present this StandICT perspective, and I'm open to any question. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Constant. And before we wrap up, because I do want to ask a question, I'd like to take this opportunity in thanking each and every one of you to joining this webinar that's been particularly interesting, useful, timely, but also very active, because we have been bombarded with quite a few questions and we may or may not have been able to tackle them all. I do have one which I think is interesting, and I'd like us to perhaps leave on this note. And one of our participants is asking, different SDOs seem to have different IPR policies, different formats for IPR declaration. And the question is, are there initiatives or a desire or will to standardize some IPR policies across the different SDOs? So I'm going to open this floor to our speakers, and perhaps Jochen, do you want to pick that up first? And then if anyone else wants to add a comment to this statement, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. I can try. Interesting idea, standardize IPR policies. There's no initiative, no intention, and I'm not aware of anybody who would say let's standardize IPR policies. The Commission has a very clear outline regarding IPRs in standardization as it is given in the Regulation 1025/2012. Where it says in Annex 2, when it comes to global ICT specification, it says they should be available under FRAND terms, which may include, at the discretion of the IPR holder, royalty free, I think, something like this. So there is this spectrum, right? And it probably makes sense to have this spectrum because different standardization areas might, in one organization or for one area, you might want to attract more the latest cost-intensive research results to be brought into standardization. There you need to offer some rewarding for people who have patents or whatever. In other areas, you want to say, so for instance, software interoperability in the IT world has been largely agreed to be available royalty-free in standards from W3C or from OASIS. So there is a spectrum that seems to be working pretty well, given the purpose they serve with their standards. So there is no intention to standardize IPR policies, at least not that I'm aware of.
Okay, do any other
Silvana.
speakers would like to add to anything here?
Yeah, Silvana, is Emilio Davila here.
Emilio, go.
Yeah, I can confirm what Jochen says. I mean, the position of the European Commission is quite clear in the communication that we adopted in September 2017. And in practice, there are different business models, and they are all valid. So you can have different IPR policies, which is valid is depending on the scope of the standard development organization. As Jochen has explained, at least what we need to ensure is that, of course, if the best contribution are included in the standard, for that, depending on the standardization organization, you may have different IPR policies. When it's about the research intensive contributions, then logically, if you want to produce incentives, normally there will be front policy in order to provide incentives for the contributors to bring their best technology. In other cases, like those W3C is a good example, then the business model may be based on having as much diffusion as possible of the standard, and then royalty-free makes sense as well. What we like in any case is that for any of the cases there is a sustainable model that will allow sustainable and open standardization. So we ensure that there is enough standards available for the different parties to build their innovation upon it, to provide for interoperability of the different applications, and also that they are attractive for the participation of the different parties depending on the business models. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emilio. So with that, there was a final question from a participant asking whether the funding opportunities would continue in the future. So this is on the cards. The Commission did issue a public call to work on, to continue this effort to have ICT standard experts supporting the various standard working groups and technical committees. So don't think it's going to disappear. So this is on the cards for the future. Yes. And with that, if there, we've come up to 5 o'clock. Thank you for, again, everybody. Thank you to the listeners who have kept on the line, and the presentations will be available on the website together with the recording as well for those of you who didn't manage to call in. Thanks once again, and congratulations on the huge effort of putting together the rolling plan. And once it is out officially, we will ensure that via our channels we will communicate this. Super. Thanks you once again. Have a wonderful afternoon and lovely evening. Thank you once again, all of you. Goodbye.